Hi, this is Chris. Welcome to part 2 of my bookbinding tutorial. And so just to recap, on the first one, took these old tablets. This was a drawing tablet, and I made this book block from it. I accidentally called this watercolor paper in my last at the end of my last video. It's drawing paper, but you could do watercolor on that. And then this sketchbook here, I made this little bit slightly larger book. So today we need to glue and process the spines to get them ready for the cover. So to do that, we'll need the following tools. We'll need my high-tech book press. We'll need some wax paper. We'll need a small hammer, a paintbrush, some PVA glue, and a mixing cup and some water. So let's get these book spines processed. Now I'm going to need to raise my book press because my book is longer than this. And this time I'm going to use these old encyclopedias. They're the same thickness. So I'll spread them apart. And then I will open my book press, wrap some wax paper around here, and then put in my text block. I'm placing my text block in here so it's just maybe a little more than a 1/16 of an inch, not quite a 1/4 of an inch, above the edge of the book press. And I'm pressing underneath, I'm pressing on the book pages to push up the center, and I'm pushing down on the top, on the outside pages, just a little, just to make sure there's just a slight bit of a dome on there. And then I'll tighten it up all the way. Here's something else I should have mentioned. I need a little bit of painter's tape just to hold this down out of the way. All the strings are above. None of them are caught in the press. They're all right above there. And then I'll mix up my glue. So this is PVA glue. It's pH neutral, professional quality, archival adhesive, dries clear, remains flexible, ideal for bookbinding and paper projects. So the glue is a good consistency. I don't think I'm going to need to thin it. But what I'll do is I'll pull all my threads out this way. We're still keeping the threads. We won't cut them off. The brown ones we won't cut off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to saturate. Oh, I have a thread caught here in the press. There we go. I'm going to saturate and work the glue between each signature, and that's what helps hold the signatures together. So I'm working the glue in like this. And be sure to wash your brush out because this is the glue that will harden your bristles if they don't get washed out right away. So the next step is to form the spine. And that's where the little hammer comes in. And I can take a little piece of wax paper and I'm just going to gently form this spine into more of a dome. So I'm pushing down the sides, pushing just a little bit in the middle to kind of flatten out those signature ends. So as I hammer, I'm hammering down and towards the edge. Okay, now I'll let that dry. I have 4 books that I can do now. These 2 that I had sewn a while back and sort of forgot about, and then these 2 that I just did. And the glue's dry. You can see there's a bit of a curve on the spine, and we can enhance that a little more even now by hammering that down a little bit. And so the next step will be to find some covers. For this book I'm going to use this not quite so heavy chipboard. And what I want to do is I want it to measure it. Oh, it's easier to see this way. I want to measure it so that it's just inside where these threads are. And then I'll measure about a 1/16 of an inch this way and this way and this way. So that would be an 1/8 of an inch longer and a 1/16 of an inch. So now we have our cover boards. And I think that looks good. So the next thing we need to do is get our cover boards on there centered best we can. And we mark where our threads are. I've got my see-through ruler here, and I'm going to, I think I'll do this about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And then we're going to punch these. So I'm going to need a strong punch. There's 2 different things you can do. I usually use my leather punch, which has several different sizes on it. But I'm going to see how my crocodile works. So this is the crocodile 2. And I'm going to put it on the 1/8 and see how big this hole is with a test. It might be too big. And then the smallest hole that I can make with my leather punch would be this one right here. So we'll see how big that one is. This one's a little bit harder to work with. It's a little bit smaller. but this one's a little bit cleaner and a little bit faster. So I think I'll use the crocodile. I want the outsides of my book boards to be nice and even. And then I will come here and I'm going to punch just on this side of the line. I'm not going to use this as my center, that's too close. I'm going to punch on this side of the line. So what we'll be doing is we'll be pulling the strings up through these holes, but we don't want the strings to make a bump in the cover, so we're going to cut a little V out of each one of these little holes. So here I have a sharp X-Acto. I'm just going to cut a little scoop out of each one of these. My threads aren't thick, so it doesn't need to be very deep. You can also finish them up a little bit with the emery board, smooth them out. If you can see that, it's really hard to see. It's just a little scoop. It's just enough for the thread to be buried in there like that. Okay, when doing the back cover, you want to be sure that you line it up correctly. I can show you if I accidentally switched it around, you'd see my holes don't line up. So you want to line it up so the holes are exactly right. And then this is the front cover, and so for the back cover you would do this side. So these threads will go through here. Well, first let's make sure we don't have any knots on the end. Okay, these threads go through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of glue right under these threads, and I'm going to keep them pulled tight. It'll be easier to do on this side because I have longer strings than I have on the other side. And you'll see that the edge comes right up to the strings there. So I let that dry, and the next step is to open the book. And then what we're going to do is unwind these threads and spread them out. So this can be a little bit tedious. Well, Buddy insisted on joining me. He likes to sit under the hot lamps. And so the next step, I've glued these all down. And the next step is I'm just going to trim the threads. And that's our cover. So now I will repeat the process on this side. I have both sides glued, and so I'm going to trim off these little sewing threads. They're glued down, the ends are glued down when we glued the spine. Just pull them up just a little bit out of the way, and then got rid of those. I have added the book boards to this one. We now have an actual book. And I'm going to just open it. I don't know if you had to do this in school, but whenever we got a new textbook, we had to open it from the front and the back. And so there's 2 more steps that we're going to do before we decorate the cover. And I will be decorating these covers with fabric. That's how I like to do my journals. And so the first thing is going to take a little bit of the cardboard off of these corners, so when the fabric is folded over, it doesn't impinge on closing the book. So I'll just take my X-Acto knife and I'll put some protection under here. And I'll just thin this out. And I'll smooth that out with my emery board. So I'll do that to all 4 corners. Okay, so I finished that little task, and I want to show you that this cover's a little bit loose. I didn't get it quite tight enough. This was the side that had the short strings from the bottom of the loom. I wasn't able to pull them as tight, but once the cover's on, that'll straighten out. And then I eased the corners. This one, it's much firmer. This was the top one, the first one I did. I did get a little bit too much off of that corner, but when it's covered, it'll be right. So the next thing to do is we need to make the hollow back. So we need some paper, and just for fun, I think I'll use some of this decorative paper scrap that I have. And we need to cut it the length and then 3 times the width. Okay, I guess I didn't hit the record button because I didn't get this part recorded, but I can do it again for this book. So I've cut it 5 inches long. I'm just going to measure with my pencil like that. Take my mini scoreboard, that's from We Are Memory Keepers, and I'm going to line this up and score that, and then I'm going to fold it over and I'm going to score it again. And then fold it over again and draw a line. That's the easy way to do it. You don't have to deal with fractions on such a small spine as that. and then I will trim it. And I'm going to glue just the two edges together. I won't glue the middle. I'm going to leave that. That will be left hollow, like a tube. So you're making a tube. Whoops! That glue is so sticky. It's all over my fingers. So then we'll take this book after I get the covers on, and it will be glued down like this. And that way, when you put the cloth on, the cloth will be glued to this, and there will be some flexibility in there with that tube of paper. So we're back to this one. I can see I need to put a little more glue in there. But now we're all done with the guts of the book. We selected and sewed together our pages in the first part of this series. Then we added a backer boards or book boards and our hollow spine. So come back again for part 3 and we'll put some fabric on the cover. I'll give you a preview of the fabrics that I have to choose from. I have this, which I used to do this book recently. This is a watercolor journal, and it's wrapped in that fabric. I have this silk. I don't really know how I would use this silk. It's a little bit thin for a book cover, but the book could be covered in a white fabric and then this could be put over it. But this is a piece of silk that was sent to my mother many, many years ago from a friend in China, and here's the little manufacturer's or importer's tag, what's left of it on the edge. I have this denim, which is way too thick for a book of this size, but it would be good for a larger book. I have this Japanese fabric. I can't remember what it's called. It has a Japanese tag on it, and that would be pretty. And then I have this one, which is nice and dark, and I have here's a book I made out of a similar fabric. This also is a watercolor journal. This one was a color pencil journal, actually. I wanted to learn how to use color pencil, and so that's another fabric covered, one of my fabric covered journals. So I have all those fabrics to choose from, and maybe by the next episode I'll decide what I want to do, or maybe I'll go look in my sewing room and see if I have something else. So come back again for part 3 and we'll get this little book done. Thanks for watching and have a great day crafting. Bye bye.